Good Matzah, Andy.
Good.
Okay, good morning, good Erev Shabbos to everybody. One of our more exciting discussions over the past couple of years had to do with different types of Jewish superstitions and where does it cross the line to things that are inappropriate. And I want to return to one part of that discussion, which has become very ubiquitous, very popular, and that is this whole custom of wearing a red string around your wrist or tying it to something. Anybody who visits the Kotel, for example, there's always an old lady there who's handing out red strings for a donation. And you find similar people at other holy sites. The question is, where does this custom come from? Does the alleged protective powers that these red strings generate raise any number of halakhic issues? In Jewish thought, we believe in Hashem. We serve Hashem, and the Torah very often warns us against foreign superstitions. We should not practice divination or sorcery. These are psukim in the Chumash. Collectively, they're known as Darkei Amori. Even though it may not be actual idolatry, it's still a forbidden practice because the non-Jewish nations, especially the pagan nations at that time, believed in all this type of divination and hocus pocus type of stuff. And this is something that Judaism is very strongly opposed to. Yet, we know that there are many, many things that we do in Judaism that seem to border on the hocus pocus type of religion. The red strings is simply one of it. I remember when my first grandchild was born, before the bris, my machtenister sneakily went into his bedroom and put a red bendel, a red string, under the mattress of where he was sleeping before the bris. The minhag. People do that all. People walk around with red strings tied around their wrists.
Very common.
It's very common. Is it Jewish? Is it appropriate? What are these red strings supposed to do? The red strings are supposed to ward off the evil eye. These are, at first glance, would seem to be relying on some kind of supernatural powers or sorcery to accomplish certain goals. And certain things might be permissible. For example, in Yeridea, for example, we have a halacha that when a king dies, you're allowed to burn his chair and his bed and his clothing to pay homage to his irreplaceability, which is an imitation of what the non-Jewish nations used to do. Clearly, there's a leftover aspect of some of this in Jewish practice. There are many amulets in Jewish life that we do, many things that we do as amulets. The whole notion of a komeya, that people would write certain Kabbalistic verses as protection against certain things. The origins may be unknown, but we do many things for therapeutic purposes. Anything, and the Gemara has many, many recipes to things to prevent sore throats, smallpox, preventative measures, people that are pregnant, difficult pregnancies.
Wally,
Yes.
what about putting a picture in the hotel?
Yeah, that's less of a problem because there you're expressing a prayer. Again, does the kotel itself have any therapeutic power? We're hoping that the message will somehow, it's no different than praying to Hashem. You don't pray to the kotel. you're praying to Hashem. Putting a note in the kotel is simply symbolic. Again, it's on the borderline. Every so often, I don't know whose job it is, but every so often they clean out all those things to make room for more. What do they
do with them?
Yeah, either they bury them or they burn them or they get rid of them or throw it in the garbage. I don't know. But every so often they clean them out, so more people can stick notes in the code. Where this began is shrouded in mystery. Somebody thought of it, and superstitions have an interesting way of developing. But is it something that's intrinsically Jewish? The Gemara actually mentions wearing a red string around your finger is an ancient folk practice. They don't prohibit it, but they note it, and it's on the borderline of what's considered Darkei Amori. It doesn't talk about tying it around your wrist or around a pregnant woman's belly or a baby carriage, but the medieval poskim concluded that only foreign rituals that were specifically denounced in the Talmud are forbidden. And this happens to be mentioned but not prohibited, so that kind of gives it a green light. And there are many, many popular folk customs, but we try to avoid things that are alien to Judaism. There are certain medicinal things that the Gemara lists, which again, I don't know who did this, but for example, to wear a fox's tooth or a grasshopper egg was somehow considered therapeutic. Where you find a grasshopper egg, I don't know, but a fox tooth perhaps you could find. And this kind of opens the door, so to speak, to the red string. And there are and some of these Talmudic recipes, even though they may have been corrupted over the years in terms of manuscripts and so forth, Shulchan Aruch seems to say it's okay. The criterion to determine how efficacious some of these practices are is very, very broad. As long as the Rashba says, as long as these things have not proven to be ineffective, which is a strange way of putting it. I guess he wasn't in a position to prohibit some of these practices, but as long as it doesn't prove harmful or ineffective, it remains permissible, according to the Rashba. The Rambam, being the rationalist that he was, is much more restrictive, and then he says that the only way you could do some of these things is if it has been proven to be effective in the past. So if somebody was suffering from a certain malady and they engage in a certain, whether it's a red string or a fox tooth or whatever it might have been, and it worked, then you can do it. So he gives it a much more specific criteria for what you could use it. Basically, these are considered by the halakha as placebos, to be generous. The Vilna Gaon was very, very opposed to all of these things. And he accused the Rambam of ignoring his own rationalism, which is why the Vilna Gaon was opposed, for example, to kaparos. He considered that a pagan practice. Many people also opposed tashlich for the same reason. On the other hand, you had many, many achronim who tried to defend some of these practices, because why have these practices survived generation after generation? Apparently because they worked, or people believed that they worked. And since these are ancient therapeutic practices, they are considered by some poskim to be legitimate. So you have two schools of thought. You have those who say because people have been doing it for such a long time, it must work. On the other hand, these are what somebody called the voodooization of Judaism. And all these amulets and charms are invalid replacements for tefillah and the belief in God's healing powers. So you have as often you have in Judaism. You have two conflicting schools of thought. Those that are more mystically oriented would believe in these komeyas and amulets and all these type of things. Those who are more rationalistic would be opposed to it. There are many, many things that people do. Even, when a person sneezes, people say, aphonemus, it must be true that something that was just said because you sneezed. That's folklore. There are many, many things that we do that are reminiscent of more ancient practices that were imitating some of the non-Jewish practices in terms of talismans, of certain incantations, which we still have. And I say, in the Kabbalistic and Hasidic circles, it's much more prevalent than in the more literature rationalistic circles. So you can ask two questions. Number one, does it do any harm to wear the Reuter Bendel, the red string around your wrist? Or the other question is it considered a semi-pagan practice that we ought not to do? Because if we want Hashem to heal somebody, if we want an event to turn out well, or somebody who's sick to get better and so forth, you daven, you say Tehillim, you do mitzvos. Just wearing a red string, and does the red string itself have healing power? I don't know if that's an indigenously Jewish belief. So these are the two parallel streams, and that sometimes these two things, they intersect. And when they intersect, we have to ask ourselves these important questions. So depending on your background, depending on what particular stream of Judaism you follow, if it's more rationalistic, then you don't go into this stuff. On the other hand, there are many, many things that we do that could be traced back to more, shall I say, less than halachic practices. But we do them because it's been our heritage for thousands of years to do certain things a certain way. The only question is whether it's appropriate to do it, and that you have to look at the poskim for. But red strings is mentioned in the Gemara, but there are many other practices mentioned in the Gemara that have pagan origins, that have non-Jewish origins, that we have adopted. Judaism, aside from its basic teachings, and this is true if you study cultures in all types of cultures throughout the world, we have what we call cultural accretions, that things that attach themselves to the baseline. And cultural practices creep in, and unless there's a very, very strong sentiment against it, they remain. As I said, the rationalist school of the Vilna Gaon was very sensitive towards non-Jewish influences in Judaism. That's why he was opposed to flowers in the synagogue on Shavuos. Sure, it reminds you of Har Sinai, where there were flowers on the mountain and God gave it. But who puts flowers in their houses of worship? Non-Jews, the churches. And therefore, the Vilna Gaon was adamantly opposed to any non-Jewish addition in the synagogue. And he didn't put flowers in his synagogue on Shavuos. So again, there are two different schools of thought, and sometimes it takes a bit of research to understand that which is originally Jewish and halachic, and that which is added on as an accretion or a popular addition based on perhaps non-Jewish sources that are more cultural than religious. And that's what you have to weigh. That's the balance. So this is something that has been bothering me for a long time, and I just wanted to share it with you. And it goes along with some of the other discussions we've had about different Jewish customs.
Wally.
Yeah.
We know that things that people do can affect outcomes, like when Yitzhak put up the striped pieces of wood and the spotted ones, and that affected what was, born.
Yeah, but that was scientific. In other words, if you put those striped pieces of wood in a trough where pregnant animals are drinking the water, it can have an effect on them. That scientifically, that has been proven.
Really?
Whether I mean, how he came upon this knowledge way back then, I don't know, but clearly things that happen while people are pregnant. I mean, and there are even some issues in terms of human pregnancies. There are certain things that pregnant women should or should not do that can affect their pregnancy. Things that they see. On the other hand, it's a very common belief that pregnant women play classical music. So the baby should hear it and be calmed and soothed. Does it have a basis in science? I don't know. A lot of people do it.
They also shouldn't go to a cemetery, supposedly.
Yeah, going to cemeteries. I remember when my daughter was pregnant, she had to ask a shiur because her husband's grandmother passed away, and she wanted to know if she could go to the funeral, and she was told not to. And these are all, is it halacha? Is it custom? Is it science? It depends what your background is.
Wally, I think with
Yeah.
I think with the women, I think that basically came about because what do you call it? A bas kohen wasn't allowed to go if someone was married to a kohen. She wasn't allowed to go to the cemetery when she was pregnant, and I think from there it kind of carried over. It kind of spread to to other people who felt they shouldn't be going either. But it's really, I think it started. That's where it started.
There's probably a scientific and medical basis for pregnant women not being subjected to things that might upset them. If a woman's pregnancy it goes through 9 months of relative calm and serenity, chances are it'll be a healthier delivery than if it goes through any type of stress. The connection between mental stress, anguish, and physical changes has been established. You can be very mentally in anguish and upset or sad, and it could affect you physically. And they don't want to do that when a woman is pregnant. So going to a cemetery can be very upsetting. Hearing about a death is bad enough. Actually going to a cemetery and watching somebody being buried can be very traumatic for anybody, certainly for a pregnant woman. So that's why they try to avoid it. That I don't think is superstition. That simply is based on common sense and medical science. So that would not be an issue. But some of the other things about should children be allowed to go to a funeral and go to a cemetery? These are all customs that I don't know are based in anything. Again, taking a child to a cemetery could be a traumatic experience. Just see all these tombstones and dead bodies. What goes through a kid's mind? It could be it's very traumatic for some adults to go to a cemetery. So I can imagine what it is for a child. On the other hand, if a child had a close relationship to a grandparent, I mean, I can tell you for a fact.
Depends what age.
My grandmother, Aleh Shalom, lived with us until I was about 8 or 9 years old. And she died in the house where I was sleeping. I had no idea that she died because I slept through the night. I had no idea she was taken away to a funeral home. And I was not allowed to go to the funeral or to the cemetery. And I felt very, very bad about that. I was very close to my grandmother. But my parents felt that I was too young or whatever and it was inappropriate. I wasn't even told that she died until after it was over. Grandma's gone, period. So it was very, very strange. But we have to try to understand that which is indigenously Jewish, that might be generic to all cultures, and that which might have non-Jewish or pagan origins. And we just have to try to avoid those things that don't have a basis in Jewish tradition or sound science.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
So going back to the red string, maybe, some people have issues with it because it's like, don't you have enough emunah in the Kodesh Baruch Hu? You're using, like, as a quote, a good luck charm, this red string, as opposed to some other superstitions like sitting down for a few minutes before you get up to go to an airport, which I never heard of till I met my in-laws. And also, if you're, let's say, laying down on the floor or reading a newspaper or something, someone dare not step over you, because those are more like superstitions, whereas the red string, it's almost like you want to hedge your bets a little better than relying on the Kodesh Baruch Hu.
All of which is true, that we said. It's all true. Some of these superstitions are certainly not based in anything Jewish. They seem to be foolish superstitions, like throwing salt over your shoulder and things of that sort, and breaking mirrors, and these are all just superstitions. There are superstitions that are based on nonsense. There are superstitions that are based on pagan practices, and we should try to avoid both. If certainly when they make no sense at all. I mean, our faith has, Shomer Pisoyim Hashem, on the one hand, that Hashem protects those who are foolish, but by the same time, the Torah also says, Tomim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. You have to believe in Hashem, and you have to do that which Hashem instructs us. And if things do not have a specifically Jewish origin or base, now the Gemara also may mention a lot of things, but a lot of things the Gemara mentions may be based on pagan practices, even in the time of the Gemara. There are many, many things that the Gemara was developed in Bavel, and in Bavel there was a lot of intermixing with the Babylonians and the Zoroastrians, and a lot of cultural interchanges of customs and superstitions, and a lot of it crept into the Gemara. The same way that many rabbis have non-Jewish names. They have Greek names and Babylonian names. So there was a tremendous intermixing of cultures, and we have to be able to know how to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, that which is indigenously Jewish and that which came on as an accretion to it, an addition, because we were living with other cultures for so long. And sometimes it's very hard to make that distinction. The bottom line is that superstition per se, unless it has a basis in something in the Torah or some kind of halakhic formulation, is not something that we should encourage, put it that way. It's certainly not harmful, but on the other hand, it might indicate a lack of faith in Hashem if you're relying on some type of superstitious, thing like a red string and so forth. You have. I used to have a kameya from my grandfather. Kameya is like a talisman that somebody wrote some Kabbalistic expressions on a piece of paper to ward off evil spirits. And he carried it with him for his entire life, and then gave it to my father, who gave it to me, which I carried in my wallet for many years, and somehow it got misplaced. If you look on your mezuzah, next time you check your mezuzahs, the mezuzah has a parsha of the Shema, fine. If you look on every mezuzah, every single mezuzah that you put on every single door, on the back of the parchment, there are a number of strange words written there. Kozu b'michsam kozu. It's a superstitious talisman. You figure out what it means. Let me know. But on every mezuzah, it's written. Why? You only commanded to put the words of the Shema in your mezuzah. Where did that custom come from? Kozu b'michsam kozu. Maybe we'll give a shiur about that one day. Why we have that on our mezuzah. It's a fascinating inscription. Take a look at it. See what answers you can come up with. It's a fascinating assignment for you. Why do we have this inscription on our mezuzah? Is it superstition? Is it a talisman? Some would hold that the mezuzah itself is like a talisman to protect our homes.
What's the phrase again? Kozu what?
Michzam kozu. Look at your mezuzah. Look at the parchment. On the back of every mezuzah parchment, you have these strange words written. Where did it come from? That's your assignment. Check your mezuzahs and look at the back of the parchment and see what it says. And why is it there?
Hello?
On every single mezuzah.
If it's not there, is it kosher?
Good question. It's a very good question. Probably. I would say probably. I wouldn't say because the requirement is to have the Shema, nothing else. But somehow that custom crept in. Ask a sofer, look it up, do some research, let me know what you find.
Wally.
Yeah.
I grew up in a house. I didn't know what was halacha and what was my mother's shtickler. Any question? You ever hear the Sassava Rebbe 1,000 years ago? Everything she would run to the Sassava Rebbe, but she had. I thought we had more than Tayyag mitzvahs and everything.
Well, again,
she believes in.
Chassidim have many.
She wasn't a she. Her father may have been. She didn't even kept for me. I think my grandfather may have been a Rebbe because I saw a Becker with about 1,000 names on it. But she kept me. I was an only child, but I never knew what was a mitzvah, what was one of her shtickler.
Lubavitch has this custom that they're not allowed to make kiddush between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Before 6 o'clock, you can make kiddush.
Right.
After 7 o'clock, you can make kiddush. But between 6 and 7, you're not allowed to make kiddush.
Why?
They have it's considered a time of bad omens. It's based, I think, on a misinterpretation of a Gemara in Shabbos. But I remember I grew up with the father of Rabbi Newbort, who was the Lubavitcher rabbi in Fairlawn. We grew up together in the same shul. We went to school together, and I was invited to their home once for a meal on Friday night when Rabbi Newbort Sr. was here, and it was in the fall, and we got back from shul. It was about 5:45, and the women were getting ready for the Shabbos meal, but he was in a snit. He said, "Hurry up! We got to make kiddush." And he was rushing, getting everybody to the table. We have to make kiddush before 6 o'clock. His wife Shetel was halfway on. The kids were not ready. They were at dress. He was, because once it was 6 o'clock, you can't make kiddush anymore. You have to wait for an hour. What it's based on, I'm not sure, but that's their minhag, and apparently other Lubavitchers do the same thing. So there are many customs out there. A lot of Jewish practices that may be intrinsically Jewish, may be carryover for some other cultures, but it's sometimes very difficult to distinguish between that which is law and that which is minhag, and sometimes these minhagim might be contrary to what is normative Jewish law. And because people have been doing it a certain way for so long, it's very hard to change. Habits are very hard to change, especially if your parents are doing it and your grandparents were doing it, and they got it from their parents. But the right to Bendel is still with us, as are many other customs. And it's just important to try to distinguish between that which is legitimate Jewish and that which must be a carryover from other cultures. And clearly, Judaism is opposed to any type of divination, any type of necromancy, any type of protective practices that might be done to various spirits. We have to try to be a little bit more rationalistic in our approach to our mitzvos. And that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you today. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
Thank you, Wally. Have a great
Thank
Shabbos.
you.
Great job out there.
Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, Trevor.
Thank you and good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. all.